Welcome to today's presentation. Prepare to immerse yourselves in the eerie realm of the supernatural with a quartet of hair-raising spectral narratives recounted by professional caregivers. These accounts represent the authentic encounters of individuals who provide intimate care for the aged and have observed phenomena that defy conventional understanding. Regardless of your stance as a believer or a doubter, these anecdotes originating from a retirement facility will challenge your perceptions of the unknown. Dim the illumination, settle in, and brace yourselves for tales that might very well disrupt your nocturnal tranquility. Narrative 1. I serve as a professional caregiver, a certified nursing assistant, CNA. Upon our initial relocation to the United States in 2003, I was past the age for secondary school attendance. Thus, I registered in an adult education program. Following its completion, I transitioned to a community institution of higher learning. After a span of 4 years, my proficiency in English had developed, and I joined a CNA curriculum. Our practical training occurred at a modest-sized elder care facility. I regret that I am unable to disclose the precise identity or whereabouts of the establishment. Nonetheless, I vividly recall our inaugural visit. Upon traversing the threshold and gaining entry to the nursing home, I perceived what sounded like the distress calls of bovine creatures. However, these were not cattle. The vocalizations emanated from the infirm and geriatric inhabitants. At that juncture, I experienced the sensation of being in an infernal domain, envisioning that within such a place, these would be the characteristic laments and clamors. My apologies. The origin of this immediate impression remains unclear. Yet it was the foremost notion that presented itself. During our time at that nursing home, we attended to the residents' hygiene, sustenance, and personal care. The established nurses and CNAs exhibited a fondness for me, attributable to my proactive assistance and dedication to ensuring the residents' dignified appearance. The act of exceeding expectations to enhance the comfort and aesthetic of these individuals provides a sense of fulfillment. As the CNA program neared its conclusion, the facility's director of nursing extended an employment offer, predicated on the commendations of the resident CNAs and nurses. This was poised to be my initial professional engagement. At that period, CNAs received compensation approximately $2 to $3 above the minimum wage, rendering it a financially favorable opportunity. Upon commencing my role, I was assigned to the nocturnal schedule, operating from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. A 6-week preparatory phase was mandated prior to my autonomous functioning. My initial encounter with the enigmatic transpired on my 4th evening. The CNA responsible for my mentorship was Amy. Amy was concurrently pursuing her nursing credentials. She possessed extensive tenure at the facility, opting for the night shift due to its diminished pace, which afforded her the opportunity to concentrate on her registered nurse, RN, coursework. I distinctly recall a patient's demise at approximately 2 a.m. The patient, named Laura, had family anticipating her passing, yet she tenaciously clung to life. Around midnight, all family members bid their farewells to Laura and departed. Subsequently, at 2 a.m., Laura expired. Amy inquired whether this marked my first exposure to a fatality, to which I affirmed. She committed to guiding me, advising against trepidation, as the departed are cognizant of our supportive intent, thus precluding any malevolent actions towards us. I assisted Amy in preparing Laura's remains. We administered ablutions, divested her of garments, arranged her hair, and meticulously cleansed her epidermis with tepid water and saponaceous solution, as though she retained vitality. Following these preparations, Amy instructed me to retrieve the cadaver enclosure from the repository. I divested myself of protective handwear, exited the chamber, and proceeded along the corridor to the storage area situated at the terminus. Upon gaining entry, I encountered an elderly woman, approximately 60 years of age, attired in a cerulean gown. She wore a white cloth beneath her chin. She made eye contact and delivered the needed item. Amy unsealed the synthetic receptacle, revealing a pristine white cadaver enclosure, accompanied by an elongated white textile and identification labels. Amy inscribed the patient's nomenclature and identification numeral on a tag, affixing it to Laura's right hallux. Subsequently, we maneuvered Laura laterally, positioned the white receptacle beneath her, and enveloped her within. Amy then employed the white textile, enshrouding it from beneath Laura's mandible to the apex of her cranium, securing it firmly. I inquired about the purpose. Amy responded that it prevents the jaw from moving. The encounter left me apprehensive. Whom had I encountered previously in the repository? How did she anticipate my requirement for the cadaver enclosure? Why did she possess an analogous white textile mirroring Laura's post-mortem arrangement? Subsequently, the mortuary transport personnel arrived to collect Laura. Following the removal of the remains, Amy and I proceeded to partake in our repast. During our meal, I inquired about the identity of the elder colleague assisting us that evening. She questioned, "What older lady?" I recounted my observation to Amy, who responded, "Ah, you must have encountered Sally. She served as a nocturnal CNA for an extensive duration, nearly 3 decades, until she succumbed to mammary carcinoma. Sally was subsequently admitted to the hospital and following that was transferred here for palliative care, expiring approximately 6 years prior. Certain nocturnal personnel report occasional sightings of her in the vehicular parking area or traversing the dimly illuminated corridors." Amy observed lacrimation in my eyes, proceeded to laugh, and reassured me that Sally posed no threat. I inquired whether Amy had attended to Sally during her terminal phase. Amy confirmed that she had indeed administered Sally's post-mortem care, including the application of the white textile around her head, mirroring the procedure performed on Laura. Narrative 2. My appellation is Ma. I previously held the position of a certified nursing assistant at a compact elder care establishment. Individuals employed in such environments frequently experience peculiar and unsettling occurrences. This may be attributed to the fact that nursing homes often represent the final residence for numerous elderly individuals who lack the capacity for self-care and remain until their demise. There was a senior woman who was relocated from the infirmary to our nursing home after developing decubitus ulcers on her gluteal region. Prolonged immobility without adequate attention can precipitate cutaneous degradation, particularly if individuals are subjected to extended periods of contact with urine and excrement without appropriate hygiene. Upon the elder's admission to the hospital, a report had already been filed with Adult Protective Services, APS. The hospital personnel recognized the gravity of her lesions and duly informed APS. I contemplated that numerous individuals might lack the requisite knowledge to effectively attend to a stroke survivor. They might not comprehend that the omission of regular repositioning of an incapacitated individual can result in the formation of pressure sores. This particular elder and I share a common racial and ethnic background. Consequently, during my shifts, she was consistently assigned to my care. My designated working hours were from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. While attending to her, I observed the infrequent nature of her family's visits. When they did appear, it typically involved a brief interaction before their departure. This elder had experienced a cerebrovascular accident, resulting in paralysis of her left upper and lower extremities. She retained the ability to self-feed using her right hand, but required assistance with all other tasks, such as clothing changes and personal hygiene. I repeatedly advised her to utilize the crimson call button for assistance. However, when she was aware of my presence, she would audibly vocalize, "Ma, I'm experiencing discomfort." "Ma, attend to me," instead of employing the device. This behavior persisted until her expiration. Her residency spanned a mere 7 months. Upon her demise, numerous relatives arrived to pay their respects and adorned her in customary funerary vestments. I remain uncertain whether these relatives were cognizant of the infrequency of visits from her immediate family. During that same week, on a Thursday evening, I was present at my place of employment at approximately 8:30 p.m. Having assisted all my assigned patients with their nocturnal preparations, I commenced my designated meal break. Following my break, I conducted a welfare check on my patients, all of whom were in a state of slumber. Upon my arrival at the nursing station, the nurse addressed me, stating, "Ma, I distinctly perceived the elder vocalizing your name, precisely as she habitually did during your absence." The nurse's demeanor conveyed genuine seriousness, devoid of levity. She exhibited her upper extremities, which were visibly covered in piloerection, goosebumps. I offered reassurance, suggesting that it was likely a product of her imagination. given our accustomed familiarity with the elder's vocalizations. By this juncture, an elderly Hispanic gentleman had already assumed occupancy of the room formerly inhabited by the elder. That evening, my shift concluded at 11 p.m. I provided a comprehensive report to the succeeding CNA, who would assume responsibility for my patients until 7 a.m. Upon completing all requisite tasks, I departed the nursing home and proceeded towards the parking area. I was unaccompanied, and the nursing home's proximity to a substantial vineyard was notable. As I was in the process of unlocking my vehicle's door, I audibly perceived the elder's voice articulating, "Ma, I'm in pain." I proceeded to open my car door, attempting self-reassurance that it was merely an auditory hallucination. However, I subsequently experienced a tactile sensation akin to formicary activity across my entire body, although I recognized it as merely piloerection. I then audibly perceived her voice once more, uttering, "Ma." I swiftly entered my vehicle and departed. I refrained from divulging this occurrence to my familial relations. The subsequent morning, my paternal figure had already departed for his occupational duties, but my maternal figure informed me that both she and my father had perceived a feminine voice vocalizing my name outside our residence the preceding evening. It was at this juncture that I disclosed the events to my mother. My mother posited that given my role as the elder's primary caregiver, she might have remained unaware of her own demise and followed me home. Given the absence of a formal funeral service, this might explain her continued ethereal presence. Following that peculiar nocturnal episode, I experienced no further anomalous occurrences. I surmise that upon the family's execution of the funerary rites that weekend, she finally transitioned from this earthly realm. It might be presumed that, due to our professional involvement in healthcare, we lack belief in such phenomena. However, even the registered nurses and numerous medical practitioners employed in elder care facilities acknowledge the existence of spectral and incorporeal entities. Long-term care facilities often serve as the final abode for many patients. However, to my knowledge, these incorporeal entities have never inflicted harm upon anyone. Thank you. Narrative 3. I was employed as a CNA within an elder care facility for a duration of 4 years, during which a considerable number of spectral and spiritual encounters transpired. Numerous individuals among us experienced anomalous phenomena. Certain elderly residents had resided there for an extensive period prior to their demise. These individuals, even in cases of expiring at the medical facility, would invariably find their way back. There was an elderly gentleman by the name of Frank who had occupied room number 12 for a considerable duration. He possessed substantial financial resources and exhibited a preference for solitary occupancy, despite the nursing home's customary practice of accommodating 2 patients per room. Frank was also a habitual consumer of tobacco products. Consequently, he would frequently venture to the exterior patio located at the rear of the nursing home to indulge in smoking within the designated area. I vividly recall a particular day when I arrived at my place of employment at 3 p.m. Paramedics were present, transferring Frank onto a gurney and conveying him to the hospital. Upon entering the facility, I inquired of the CNA who had worked the morning shift regarding Frank's condition. She informed me that Frank had abruptly commenced experiencing hematemesis, vomiting blood, and respiratory distress. This was peculiar, as he had appeared to be in satisfactory health the preceding day, engaging in his customary smoking activity on the patio. That evening, after assisting all my assigned patients with their nocturnal preparations, I proceeded to the nurse's station to complete some documentation. Abruptly, the call light emanating from room 12 illuminated. I mentally questioned the occurrence, as no one should have been present within that room. Frank remained at the hospital. Even the registered nurse, Lisa, expressed bewilderment, inquiring about the occupant of room 12. I proceeded to investigate and found the room vacant. I deactivated the call light and returned to the nurse's station, only for it to reactivate. I repeated the process, deactivating the light and returning, yet it illuminated once more. I ultimately delegated the task to another CNA, stating it was her turn. She complied and subsequently resumed her seated position. By this point, Lisa, the nurse, suspected a potential adverse development regarding Frank's condition. She initiated telephonic communication with the hospital and received confirmation that Frank had expired at approximately 7:30 p.m. that evening. We experienced significant consternation, and when the call light in Frank's room activated on two subsequent occasions, we collectively proceeded to deactivate it. The final occurrence transpired at 10:20 p.m. Lisa and I entered the room concurrently. Lisa addressed Frank, stating, "Frank, you are no longer among the living. Please transition to be with the divine. Your residency here has concluded." Following this pronouncement, the lights ceased their erratic behavior. Nonetheless, there remain nocturnal periods when certain staff members report observing an individual resembling Frank seated on the dimly illuminated patio. While unsettling, such occurrences were commonplace within the nursing home environment. Narrative 4. I am currently employed as a CNA within a nursing facility that encompasses two distinct wings. One wing is designated for short-term rehabilitative care, where patients typically reside for a period ranging from a few days to several weeks, until they regain sufficient strength to return to their residences. The other wing is dedicated to long-term care, indicating that patients generally remain there until their demise. I acknowledge that it may sound insensitive, but the long-term care section can sometimes feel like a repository for individuals who can no longer take care of themselves. These individuals lack the capacity for self-care, attributable to either advanced age and debility, or the presence of a pathological condition or ailment that has resulted in paralysis or an inability to perform activities of daily living. One day, a 58-year-old gentleman was transferred from the hospital to the nursing facility where I'm employed. This individual had previously received care from his family within his domestic setting. However, during weekdays, his offspring were engaged in academic pursuits, and his spouse was occupied with occupational obligations, resulting in a lack of available caregivers until their return. The first family member to arrive home was tasked with attending to his needs. Due to this circumstance, he frequently found himself recumbent in his own bodily waste, resulting in significant cutaneous erythema and excoriation extending from his coccyx to his perineal region. The family recognized their inability to provide adequate care and consequently opted to place him in the nursing facility. His family members visited him with near-daily frequency, and his spouse dedicated her weekends to spending time with him. During a conversation with his spouse, she recounted that their daughter, C, was attending a university situated approximately 2 hours away, driving an older model Honda Accord. On a particularly hot day, around 4 p.m., her husband went to change the oil in C's car and experienced a cerebrovascular accident while working on it. The family members inside the house remained oblivious to the fact that he was experiencing a stroke outdoors. This unfortunate event led to his paralysis and subsequent inability to move his body. I provided exceptional care to this gentleman whenever I was on duty. He was unable to communicate verbally, and we administered sustenance solely through a gastrostomy tube inserted into his stomach. Slightly over a year later, this patient succumbed to a systemic bloodstream infection. He presented with numerous lesions on his gluteal region, such that during defecation, bacterial pathogens would gain access to his circulatory system, ultimately culminating in his demise at the hospital. Their daughter, C, who was attending university, exhibited remarkable kindness. She consistently visited her father, and I engaged in numerous conversations with her. She is a highly intelligent individual. When she sent me a text to say he passed, I was informed of her emotional distress. 7 months following this patient's passing, one evening, I undertook a 3-hour drive to visit my significant other, as he resided in a different municipality. He expressed reservations about my visit due to the considerable distance. Typically, my significant other is the one who undertakes the journey to visit me. However, he was experiencing vehicular difficulties, and his automobile remained at the repair facility. That evening, we attended a cinematic exhibition and subsequently partook in a meal. Following this, I returned my significant other to his residence. My own vehicle had been exhibiting erratic behavior. It demonstrated sluggish starting characteristics, and upon depression of the accelerator pedal, it exhibited a delayed and diminished response. Occasionally, the vehicle would exhibit tremors. I recall driving homeward, and as I traversed a small rural town, my vehicle commenced shaking and decelerating significantly, despite maximal depression of the accelerator pedal. I harbored apprehension that my vehicle might experience a complete mechanical failure in transit, prompting me to maneuver to the roadside and bring the vehicle to a standstill. Subsequently, the engine ceased operation and failed to restart. I contacted my significant other, who invariably remains awake until my safe arrival home. He indicated that he and his elder sibling would come to my assistance. My significant other possesses limited automotive knowledge, rendering him unable to diagnose the malfunction. I experienced trepidation and, for some inexplicable reason, speculated that my vehicle might have depleted its water or coolant supply. Observing two approaching vehicles in the distance illuminating the roadway, I resolved to expeditiously exit my vehicle and open the engine compartment to investigate. I proceeded to open the hood and egress to inspect my vehicle. I observed that the coolant reservoir was approximately half full, thus excluding that as the causative factor. The two oncoming vehicles traversed past me. At that precise moment, I experienced a distinct sensation, akin to an individual entering my vehicle, accompanied by a noticeable tremor of the car. I moved laterally and directed my illumination source into the vehicle's interior, but I observed no occupants. I perceived what appeared to be a silhouette on the opposite side of the car, prompting me to project my small flashlight beam through the windows and cautiously approach to ascertain the potential presence of an individual. Abruptly, the engine compartment hood descended autonomously. This particular hood design necessitates a supporting rod for maintenance in the open position, rendering its spontaneous closure inexplicable. I experienced a surge of fear and swiftly re-entered my vehicle, securing all doors. Subsequently, upon the initial rotation of the ignition key, my vehicle commenced operation without further incident, and I resumed my journey. After a 20-minute drive, I exited at a fuel station and contacted my significant other, informing him of my vehicle's restored functionality and obviating the need for his assistance. I conveyed that my estimated time of arrival home would be approximately 1 hour. That evening, upon reaching my residence, I contacted my significant other to inform him of my arrival, and subsequently retired to sleep. I experienced a dream wherein I was present at my place of employment, and the gentleman I had previously cared for manifested while I was attending to an elderly patient's nutritional needs. He approached me, presented me with a vehicular key, and articulated that my vehicle's spark plugs were aged and malfunctioning, necessitating replacement. I accepted the key from him and subsequently awoke. It was a peculiar dream. Remarkably, my elder sister's significant other subsequently inspected my vehicle, conducted a test drive, and confirmed that the spark plugs were indeed the source of the malfunction. I possessed no prior knowledge of spark plugs, but he clarified that they were inexpensive and offered to procure replacements and rectify the issue. He proceeded to do so, elucidating that spark plugs serve to initiate the combustion process within the engine, thereby generating power. My vehicle exhibited no further issues following this intervention. However, I was astonished by the accuracy of my dream. Perhaps it was not merely a dream. It is conceivable that on that particular evening, the gentleman I had cared for intervened and provided assistance. I remain uncertain. While it constitutes an unsettling experience, it evokes a sense of warmth and solace when I reflect upon it. This concludes the presentation. I express my gratitude for your sustained attention and support of my narratives. I wish you a pleasant day or evening.